This
Um,
conference will now be recorded.
you know the ones that say like 1201, 1401, then you have 20 whatever that, and they're different domains or different items. Those I have
Right.
learned that in the test questions, the ones that start off in the 1000 range are higher level. The ones that are in the 2000 range are a whole lot more detailed. And that's kind of some of the
Right.
questions that I'm seeing throughout the books on that. So that's something to keep in mind. It's been an easy way for me to get, questions right actually.
Good tip. Should have put a slide on that one. Alrighty, well, welcome to week 4 of the CISA book club. I can't believe January's already gone. It seems like it was just Christmas. And I think we kind of mostly took roll call already. I'm caller 2. It looks like I'm not sure who caller 3 is, but welcome to everybody. Hopefully, most of you or a good portion of you have signed up for the test already. I know Mark was trying to do that this morning. So hopefully you guys have done that, because I mean, once you pull the trigger on committing to that test, I think you're in deep, and you'll, you can't really avoid studying for it, because you won't, one, you don't want to fail the test and basically be kind of have to do it all over again, and two, it's, a healthy amount of money too. And just, we've seen this slide before, just the links for the, to get the books. I trust you guys have already got those already. And also you can, use these meetings for CPs, I believe, on the non-CISA certifications we have. And here's the schedule. We actually just added a new slide for this, that we're going to try to aggregate some of these slides, because we've got kind of a lot of them with dates, but this is kind of more of a top level overview one. So we're basically starting in a new domain today, and it's the process of auditing information systems. Here's that new schedule that's got a little bit more detail, that will, we might modify this a little bit more, but we'll try to aggregate some of these schedules so that it's all in one here. And again, kind of maybe a little bit of motivation to make sure you do this before June, because the exam percentages are changing. And then, I mean, there could possibly be other changes that we are not aware of yet. And the current exam format, 150 questions, 4 hours. Kind of the assignments we did were in the new domain, as we discussed. And kind of just a little tip for using that CISA book, because those answers are bold, even if you've got, the left side of the page covered, it's kind of easy to, consciously or subconsciously see the answer on the, the right side of the page. And even with those blank pieces of paper on there, you can almost see through it as it is right there. So maybe even use a thicker piece of paper just to keep yourself honest. And then also on that ISACA book, I'm really a big fan of this book. The wrong answers, even if you've got a question that you think is pretty easy, and you zero in on the right answer right away, I think there's a lot of value in the explanations that say why each of the other choices are wrong. So, if you can, what I would highly recommend is you, on every single question, read all the choices, both right and wrong, for the explanations. And then one of the test sites, practice test question sites, the audit script site, it basically asks you to kind of authenticate, and it doesn't seem to matter if you put in a real one. I would just put a fake one in there, just because you never know what kind of spam or whatever email list you're going to get into if you put a real one on there. And then we added a scoring sheet to the Slack channel. It's basically an Excel spreadsheet And basically what it does is it's just there to allow you to easily, mark down your answers, and then it will grade it for you too, because the answer key is included in that. And we'll see that on the next slide. So on the left side is a hidden view of what that answer sheet looks like. Columns E, F, and G are hidden. And so as you're going to go through that practice test, you're going to, answer in those little green boxes there. And then after you can also time yourself just to get an idea of how much time you're taking to get through 150 questions. And then on the right side, that's the unhidden view. And then it shows you the answer key, and there's a little scoring thing there that will automatically tell you if you're right or wrong. At the very bottom of it, which is not included in the picture there, it gives you kind of a percentage of how you did. I think that's a little bit easier than breaking out a piece of paper than having to manually go back and manually grade the thing. And then here's just an overview of this week's reading from the Peter Gregory book. This should look fairly familiar to you guys. And part 2 of that. And we can jump right into some discussion questions here. Which of the following outlines the overall authority to perform an IS audit? The audit scope of goals and objectives, a request from management to perform an audit, the approved audit charter, or the approved audit schedule. Anyone want to take a stab at that? I didn't think this one was a real tough question, especially since it kind of aligns with the PCI charter requirements. I think the gist of this question, too, from an industry standpoint, is C-level folks aren't supposed to be able to shield themselves from accountability and these kind of things anymore. And so I've also got a little clip from the Peter Gregory book that basically tells you that the charter clearly defines roles and responsibilities. So that answer is going to be C on that question. Question 2. And this is similar to the previous one. An IS auditor reviews an organization chart primarily for and getting information about data flow to assess number of employees in each department, understanding the responsibilities and authorities of individuals, or D, to assess number of laptops, desktops in each department. So I'm sure a couple of those can be thrown out pretty easily. So understanding the responsibilities and authorities of individuals. And as we're going through these two, I think what would be helpful to you guys if you just kind of, if you don't say it out loud, just, in your head, just kind of read the question, guess what your answer is going to be. And on this one, which of the following the best time to perform a control self-assessment involving all concerned parties? On this one, I think A and D are kind of after the fact, and then C is kind of too late, which would make B the best answer. So during the preliminary assessment, we'll jump back to that real quick here. And so, I mean, this is an internal process, so that's why B is going to be the best choice on this. And I thought this question was a little bit tougher. In an audit of an inventory application, which approach would provide the best evidence that purchase orders are valid? Anyone want to take a stab at this one? Sean? Sean's on the phone.
It's either Bravo or Charlie, I think. A, application primer sounds too technical. D, application documentation, that's not the way. So it's B or C, best evidence that purchase orders are valid. Computer listing, I don't know what a computer listing is. Comparing receiving reports to purchase order details. That is a good audit control. I don't know if it's the best way to determine purchase orders are valid. I'm going Charlie.
Okay, let's see how he did. Oh, that's the first.
So that one was definitely a trick question.
Yeah. So it looks like they're really focusing on change control here.
Yeah, that answer just still looks off to me, but it's what they have.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, some of these questions look like they're being answered by, maybe not so much in this one, but some of them have kind of got like the English spelling on them. We'll see that later on, so I'm not really sure where these actually, who authored these. But anyways. And this question, I think there's a lot of questions like this one that you'll see across all domains. It seems like a lot of questions in this format. The thing is, on the materiality of it, is whether the item is a showstopper or not. So I've seen other questions where the difference is what they're talking about in the find is whether it's, you know, a showstopper or not, basically makes them kind of stop the presses or not. Anyone want to take a stab at this one?
I'd lean towards D because you can't. I mean, the other ones like B, you're not going to conduct a detailed system audit, but the A and C seem to kind of disregard it. D seems to be like we'll look at it and recommend more detail, but I don't know.
I like it, Jerry.
He gets a cigar.
Woo!
So I think that was some good talking points in that question too, on how to kind of disassemble the answers there. Oops. Sorry about that. This thing's being sluggish on me here.
I'll go B.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, and this question, it's an easy question, but it's a good example of one where none of them are really patently wrong. Which of the following is the most important reason why an audit planning process should be reviewed at periodic intervals? So to plan for deployment of all available audit resources, to consider changes to the risk environment, to provide inputs for documentation of the audit charter, to identify applicable IS audit standards. And then it seems like there's a lot of practice questions I've run into where kind of the default, the go-to answer was, you know, risk assessment. So that one kind of falls into that category as well. A primary benefit derived from an organization employing control self-assessment techniques is that it can identify high-risk areas that might need a detailed review later, allows IS auditors to independently assess risk, can be used as a replacement for traditional audits, allows management to relinquish responsibility for control. And on this one, I think we can pretty much easily dismiss C and D. not going to really replace anything. And D is a real obvious long one, because management is never going to be allowed to relinquish responsibility for anything. So then we're basically left with A and B. And then, so I think on that one, B is going to be the better answer.
It's A.
Oh, I think it was A. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Reading the wrong question there. Okay. So kind of, oops, I'm sorry. So this is kind of similar to, looking at that, kind of doing the risk assessment as well. The first step in planning an audit is to A, define audit deliverables, B, finalize the audit scope and audit objectives, C, gain an understanding of business objectives, or D, develop an audit approach or strategy. So it's saying the first step. So anyone want to take a stab at this one?
I'd say C. What does the business want to get out of it?
Yeah, and I think D would be subsequent to C. So if we're kind of doing the greater than, less than sign, C is greater than, becomes is before D would be. And if we want to dismiss A and B, A, define audit deliverables, that would seem to be later in the process. And finalize the scope, I mean, just by saying finalize, seems like we can get rid of that one too. So let's see what this, so yep, C, good job. You guys read through that. And number 9, the IS auditor should use the plan IS audit coverage. I'm sorry, the approach an IS auditor should use to plan IS audit coverage should be based on. You want to take a stab at this one?
It's gonna be Alpha or Bravo. I haven't read enough of the material yet. Anybody else want to chip in on risk or materiality? I'm leaning towards materiality.
I would definitely agree on kind of dismissing C and D. I mean, professional skepticism, that's not, we use that in real life, but that's not good on the test.
I did it because my gut told me.
Yeah, exactly. And sufficiency of audit evidence, that's not really a very good answer either. And this is so they went with risk. I think that one's kind of a tougher one to choose between those two. But it seems like a lot of times the default answer is going to include risk. So this was the answer that they provided, standard S5. That term does not show up in the Peter Gregory book. But there's some other stuff that I found from the Peter Gregory book that kind of targets risk also. And this is an example of a question where you're going to need to know some of the definitions of the types of controls. I think some of these are fairly intuitive in terms of, preventive management, corrective, or detective. when you're talking about a tape backup or restoring from a tape backup, I mean, that's going to be post-event, it sounds like. So from that standpoint, I think C is going to be the best answer. Tape backup would not be a preventive control and not a management control and not really detective control. I think C is going to be the correct answer on that one. And then there's the definition from the Peter Gregory book as well. I think on those, the category of questions that cover those types of controls, I think, you know, as long as you've got those definitions somewhat memorized, those should be gimmies for you on the test, hopefully. Question 11, in a risk-based audit planning, an IS auditor's first step is to identify and this is kind of a repeat of an important theme. One thing I remember seeing too on questions of this type was where they're asking the first step. There were other questions that were structured along the lines of, you know, what is the inventory in place? Identify the assets, kind of a thing. So be careful when you see that as one of the answer choices. So on this one, I think we can pretty much get rid of C and D pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, if it only makes sense as B, because if you're planning the entire audit program or whatever on risk, based on risk, it's got to be where are the risk areas in the organization.
I'll go A. I'll go A with responsibility of stakeholders, just to mix it up. First step. Oh.
I think he knew he was going to answer that just so he could cue up that buzzer.
That's not true. I also had a correct sound ready, so that's not true.
Oh, what's the correct sound like? Correct sound broken. All righty. Alrighty, 12. Yeah, here's that one I was talking about. It looks like this came from Brit or something because utilization is spelled with an S. But anyways, major advantage of a risk-based approach for audit planning is audit planning can be communicated to client in advance. Audit activity can be completed within allotted budget. Use of latest technology for audit activities, or appropriate utilization of resources for risk areas. Anyone want to take a stab at that one?
I like D for a major advantage of risk-based auditing, but I don't know if I like it for an advantage of audit planning. It's a good result of a risk-based audit, but
when you think of audit planning, you need to figure out how many people you need and which areas are going to be highest risk and how you would put those people in, you know, make sure you get, as you're doing your plan, the mix correct.
I agree with that.
Makes sense.
Right, appropriate utilization for resources with high areas. The risk-based approach is designed to ensure audit time is spent on the areas of highest risk. The development of an audit schedule is not addressed by a risk-based approach. Audit schedules may be prepared months in advance using various scheduling methods. The risk approach does not have a direct correlation to the audit staff meeting time budgets on a particular audit, nor does it necessarily mean a wider variety of audits will be performed in a given year. While determining the appropriate level of protection for an information asset, an IS auditor should primarily focus on criticality of information asset, cost of information asset, owner of information asset, result of vulnerability assessment. On this one, between A and D, to me, that was a little bit of chicken and egg, like which of those comes first. But criticality is a measure that would go into risk analysis. So then I think A would be the better choice. Agree with that one? I actually thought that one was kind of tough. I think this one's a bit tricky too. Senior management has requested that an IS auditor assist the departmental management in the implementation of necessary controls. The IS auditor should refuse the assignment since it's not in the role of the IS auditor, inform management of his or her inability to conduct future audits, perform the assignment and future audits with due professional care, obtain the approval of user management to perform the implementation and follow-up. There were other questions you might run into that are structured with, they just, if there's a conflict of interest with the IS auditor, they just need to make sure they kind of disclose that in advance. And that one really isn't a choice here. So anyone want to take a stab on this one?
Well, it's not A. You wouldn't just refuse to do it without explaining or whatever.
It's not B because I don't think it affects your ability to conduct future audits because you haven't even done anything yet. So it's not B. I kind of did like A little bit. A or D? Charlie's no good because you should be doing due professional care anyway. So C doesn't change anything. But A or D?
Yeah, I didn't like D because it says user management. Let's see what their explanation is. I wasn't a big fan of this question. Anyone have any comments on the answer that was provided?
I think the reason they do this and make really bad questions like this is just so that we do miss some when we take exams.
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
I think the key, though, the key to the answer is it's not the auditor's decision. It's always management's decision, right? Make management aware of the situation, advise them of what the conflict of interest might be, what the risk is, and let management make the decision on what you're supposed to do. I think that's the key to it.
Okay, I'm gonna jump back on that one real quick.
Hey, Jerry, I think the B is good, right? If you agree to do the implementation that they ask, I agree with B, I guess. But if you're not going to do the implementation, you don't have to tell them that you can't do future audits. So it's kind of reliant on unstated that you agreed to do what they ask.
Yeah. It is a tricky one for sure.
I thought this was a fairly straightforward question. While applying an audit, an assessment of risk should be made to provide reasonable assurance the audit will cover material items, definite assurance that material items will be covered during the audit work, reasonable assurance that all items will be covered by the audit, sufficient assurance that all items will be covered during the audit work.
It's not B. It can never be definite.
Yeah. And then C, that key word where it says all items, I don't really like that.
D has that as well. D has all in it as well. So is it A?
Kind of jumping back to that. So a lot of times they're going to use these kind of definitive terms which will disqualify an answer, and that's why I think we can kind of get rid of these two. Can you see my mouse okay?
Yep.
Okay. So these two are using that definitive all, and then indefinite also. So we come on A, we're arrive at A. This one, I thought this was a bit tougher because of, I think this one, what makes this one a little bit tougher might be because of the experience we might all have in auditing data centers. An IS auditor is reviewing data center security, auditing data center security review. Which of the following steps would an IS auditor normally perform first? Evaluate physical access control, determine the vulnerabilities/threats to the data center site, review screening process for hiring security staff, or evaluate logical access control. Like if I'm thinking with my PCI hat on, I'm looking at a website where it gives staff access to the data center, and then a week later I might go visit the data center. So with that thinking in mind, I would shoot myself in the foot on this question.
This is a security review, which I presume is different than other, like an audit to something. So maybe it's about determining the vulnerabilities, threats to the data center site first, so you know what to evaluate.
You can do your ding. They're really trying to, I think the gist of this question is 30,000 feet here. During planning, the IS auditor should get an overview of the functions being audited and evaluate the audit and business risk. Choices A and D are part of the audit fieldwork process that occurs subsequent to the planning and preparation. Choice C is not part of the security review. So on this one, you're definitely going to need to be thinking from an ISACA standpoint, I think. This is another one where I think none of them are patently wrong. An IS auditor has evaluated controls for the integrity of the data in a financial application. Which of the following findings would be the most significant? Anyone want to take a stab on this?
It's not B. Backup wrote that could be enough. Who knows? So we can't say B is meaningful. D might not be meaningful. The fire controls, is it enough? Hard to say. Maybe they don't need it. C, documentation is incomplete. Yeah, I don't know if that's important or not. It could be in some environments, maybe not all. A would be pretty applicable no matter what kind of the environment, maybe.
You got your finger on your little sound effect? So yeah, they're basically keying in the change control on that one. We'll jump back to that real quick. So I would agree that the documentation is not, super significant. That would be an AFR type thing. Application data is only backed up once a week. If this question was structured where it says the application data is never backed up, that would, add another element to that question. But because you're saying once a week, that we don't really know if that's significant or not. And we don't, that one's, fire detection system, that one we can throw out pretty easily. So change control it is. And on this next one, I apologize, something is wrong with this slide. I've got a note that says to fix the slide, and I'm not sure what I didn't do right on here. In planning the audit, the most critical step in the identification of the that one seems pretty obvious. I'm not sure why I have a note on this. This needs to be fixed. Oh, I know why, because I failed to put my clip from Peter Gregory. So going back to that, that one should be kind of a gimme, kind of that same risk theme we keep going over and over again. Question 19. Similar to that whole risk theme and whether or not things are showstoppers. An IS auditor is reviewing payroll application. He identified some vulnerabilities in the system. What would be the next task? So I think we could throw out D pretty easily. And
A, sorry, I guess A makes sense. I'm just wondering about the level of verification that you should do ahead of time before informing management immediately, or I guess if you've verified that it's a vulnerability, it's time to do A, I guess, if it's verified.
Yeah, this kind of going back to what we discussed before about, whether or not it's a showstopper. I think in this case, we're kind of indicating that, it might not be a super showstopper. Otherwise, I think the choice is going to be between A and C. I guess it kind of depends on how severe these vulnerabilities are.
Or whether there's any compensating controls in place that take care of them.
So basically, I think the gist of this one is they're saying, the auditor needs to do his homework before he goes running, and runs this thing up the flagpole to management.
So you're saying think before you speak?
Yeah, apparently. Number 20. Which of the following audit phases identifies the technical skills and resources needed for an audit? I think this one should be easy. We kind of covered this. Somebody had a comment on an earlier question that kind of covered this question. I think it was Jerry, actually.
Well, what did I say?
You talked about, well, I don't know. I can't say, or I'll give away the answer.
Probably about planning, I'm going to guess.
You're saying B?
It is the only planning one.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, Sean had remarked in the CISA Book Club Slack channel that he was going to take the test like this afternoon or something, wasn't it? And I thought that was pretty bold, but you're doing pretty well. Practice questions so far.
I think it's helped not reading the book.
21. Yeah, this is another one of these things where you're going to want to memorize these terms. Which of the following audit classifications is designed to assess issues related to the efficiency of operational productivity within an organization? And I can tell you that there are terms within each of these definitions that are, going to be revealed within the question here. So if anyone has got these memorized, and I think these aren't quite as intuitive as the like the preventive and detective control type stuff. So these, I think you'll definitely want to make sure you memorize all these from the Peter Gregory book.
I guess we know what a forensic audit is, so it's not that, and we know what a financial is, so it's not that. It's A, administrative. Great.
And then here's a clip from the Peter Gregory book. where even though the source of this question isn't from Peter Gregory, the definition of an administrative audit aligns up pretty closely here, because it's basically saying operational efficiency, and this is saying operational productivity here. And that was page 166 in the Peter Gregory book. An IS auditor should use which of the following when developing the overall IS audit plan and determining priorities for the effective allocation of IS audit resources?
Clark, is it another one? If it's got the word risk, it's the right answer?
Yeah. On this one, I think D, that work of outside experts, that one is fairly easy to toss out on the side. And IC governance, I think on this one might be a little too high level. But I agree that, between risk assessment and materiality, however you say that word, is, that's probably the tougher choice on this question. And here we are with the risk term again. And I don't have any notes on the next three. Sherry, do you want to speak on these?
Sure. So not to get anything confusing here, an IS auditor is reviewing an organization's recovery from a disaster in which not all the critical data needed to resume the business operations were retained. Which of the following was incorrectly defined? So this is what I saw in so many exams. It's like they give you the acronyms. So does anybody know what RTO is? That is the recovery time objective. The SDO. Does anybody know what the SDO is? Service delivery objective. The RPO is the recovery point objective. So make sure you know these, because this is a type of test that you will get. Does anybody have a stab at the answer? I'm going to take that as a no and go to the next page. Oh, I can't. Can you? There we go. So it's actually the recovery point objective. Because in this case, they didn't have all the critical data they needed to resume. It's based on acceptable data loss in the case of a disruption, and the RPO defines the point in time when it's necessary to recover. Next one. And next one.
The RPO.
Oh.
Yeah, that's interesting. They are this. Sorry about that. That was my bad. Okay. During the course of an audit, the IS auditor discovers that the Human Resources Department uses a cloud-based application to manage employee records. The HR department engaged in a contract outside of the normal vendor management process and manages the application on its own. Which of the following choices is of most concern? Anyone want to take a stab at this one?
I'll guess B, Bravo, just because it's kind of root cause maybe of A, C, and D. If you're doing B, maybe the rest had a chance of getting fixed. Either that or D. D could be a little root cause too, because the policies aren't being applied, but maybe that's up to the IT department to do. So B.
Oh, I was on the wrong screen when I pressed it. Oh, I keep trying to advance the screen, and I keep not being able to because Clark is controlling it. There we go. So D, what they're really looking for is you may have special things that you, configuration standards, there are policies that you need to go by for things such as PCI. You may need to have something more specific to that done. So it's very important to have those security policies and make sure that your policy is actually going forward into your application that's going into the cloud.
Actually, just on this question though, there's nothing in the question that says that we believe that the security policies are not applied to the cloud application. Maybe it is deployed perfectly.
It could be, but what they're saying here is what is the one of most concern? And most concern is that they would not be applying security policy to the cloud application.
Yeah, well, it says are not applied, but we don't know that. Maybe they are. I don't know.
So
anybody else?
Yeah, I was going to add one comment that I remember seeing other practice questions that kind of go along the lines when you're talking about kind of service provider management, that there needs to be policies in place. And to me, that one kind of reads like a similar question.
Right. Okay. It does say it's outside the normal vendor management process. So that normal means policy. So, yep, that makes sense.
The next one. A local area network administrator normally would be restricted from having end user responsibilities, reporting to the end user manager, having programming responsibilities, or being responsible for land security administration.
That one should be a gimme, huh?
I'm not hearing that from the crowd.
I don't want to answer every one of them.
It's got to be C, right?
Segregation of duty should be.
You're absolutely correct. It is C. Yeah, these don't always make sense to me. That's Clark, back to you.
Okay. So that's our bank of questions for today. As far as like the format, anybody have any comments about, do we need to cram more questions in? Too many? I mean, sometimes we can, get into a big discussion that can slow us down, but actually I think that part of it is probably the most valuable thing we do here.
Yeah.
Is when we dissect all the answers and both right and wrong.
I have a question for the people on the phone. Has anybody here actually done one of those self-assessment or self-control audits?
I have not.
I haven't either. I've never heard of them until this book, and I was just curious if anybody had done any.
Yeah, in that back of the, kind of going a little bit off topic here, but in the back of that Peter Gregory book, the last 200 pages is basically kind of how to do an audit kind of a thing. And there was some kind of good stuff in there that I thought, there's a lot of questions that, when we're doing a PCI audit that we should be asking, aren't asking, that are kind of covered in that thing.
Good point.
So for next time, we're going to have the second part of chapter. Second part of chapter 3 in the Peter Gregory book. And that second part of chapter 3, as I think I indicated earlier, there's going to be more terms definitions in there. So, even though that is maybe more memorization and less concept driven, I think to a certain extent that makes the questions a little bit easier, just because you can kind of it'll be fairly black and white. And anybody else schedule their exam? I know, I think Mark Hanna did that. He pulled the trigger on that this morning.
Sean, are you going to go ahead and take yours today?
February 26th was the date that I had kind of picked. It was available, and it seems a nice distance from now. Things will be fresh. I love the time you guys have put into these questions and everything. I really appreciate it. I'm thinking I don't want to wait too much longer than that.
I would agree with you.
Then the added pressure is then on the following day, we're going to be all, Sean, so did you pass? Did you pass? And then you'll be
Of course he's going to pass. I can't believe that was a question.
And then that following Friday, you get to run the CISA book club, okay? That'll be your reward.
Perfect.
Okay,
how many sessions do we have left? Does it go much longer than February 26th?
I think it was
March 15th, I think, is the last one.
Maybe I'll go till then.
I can jump back to that slide real quick if you want.
Actually, March 22nd is the last one.
Okay.
Sherry, do you already have this certification?
Yes.
Oh, well, so you're a helper here too. Well, I appreciate all the effort you guys are putting into helping the rest of us.
I'm learning so much, learning an auditor's perspective. When I took the exam the first time, golly, I'm surprised I passed it. And I did. Now I have such a deeper understanding. And what I'm finding is that I'm starting to fall back on this when I'm doing interviews and things in my QSA job. So it's helping more than I was thinking it would.
The answer to that question, I guess we've got it going out to 322.
Okay.
That's what I'll be aiming for.
And I think we're pretty much right near the top of the hour. I guess we got 5 minutes left here. Any other questions, concerns, comments, advice? Cue the cricket sound. I guess Greg's not here with that one today.
Yeah, I just wanted to add my thanks to you guys, Clark and Sherry, for organizing all this. It's very helpful.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it.
Glad you joined us.
All right.
I think people get 5 minutes back. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 4 now. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And we will talk to you next week. And please look at that. One thing I wanted to add real quick on that practice test that's in the back of the CISA book, kind of 150 questions. I would recommend you don't really try to take that until you think you're ready. And the reason for that primarily is just so you don't, have those answers somewhat memorized. So when you do take it, you're fresh and, you're not, don't already kind of have a clue of what the answers might be. So that way you can kind of assess yourself objectively. And that is it. And I will talk to you guys all next Friday.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
I'll get the slides posted up as soon as I can.
Not sure what that was, but I think he was saying thank you.
I think so.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Clark, you did great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.